Hey guys, it's Goosebumps Completionist, bringing you another book review today, and the book I'm reviewing is Creature Teacher, book 3 from series 2000. This was one of my childhood favorite books, and rereading it recently was a big treat. I love this book just as much. Very fun read. It's a mixture of like humor, visual horror, and just creepy suspense, especially near the end. I can't express how much I really enjoyed this book. So anyway, the story is about this kid named Paul, and Paul's a class clown type, and then he acts up in middle school, and his parents send him to this boarding school out in like the middle of the woods, out in the middle of nowhere, isolated from everything. Can only call on holidays. It's so bizarre. And Paul knows he'll be miserable here, but his parents are pretty much left with no choice with him. And right off the bat, you start developing sympathy with Paul, because Paul, even though he's kind of a dud, he's kind of outwitted with everything he does, you feel sympathy for him because even though he's trying too hard, he realizes at least that he has a sense of doing the right thing. And he's always keeping that in mind, rather than Scott from like Trick or Trap, where it's the opposite, where he just does what people tell him to do because he's afraid of everything, and you just don't like him for why he does what he does. This one, Paul, he tries to have people to like him, and he tries to be unique, and he tries to be creative, but he's hard to understand, and he's kind of an outcast, and that's why he's relatable on that aspect. So, off the bat, I think you guys would really enjoy Paul as a character, for the most part. So Paul goes to his first day of class, and he discovers why all these kids are meticulously studying and reading and doing all this homework, not chatting. Finds it really bizarre. And then this creature-looking woman, basically the cover right here, walks in the classroom, and this is where things go very south for Paul. Paul has a terrible first impression with this teacher, and the teacher puts him on the food chain pretty low. And the food chain is kind of like, a gold star board, like your teacher used to give you in like elementary school or middle school. You'd have a gold star board. Well, this is a food chain, and the goal is you don't need stars. You just can't be the very bottom person, or something bad's going to happen to you. So Paul, of course, shows to be a class clown, and then he meets these friends, Celeste, Molly, and Brad, through this, and they all tell him that Miss Marg's a monster, and if you don't do well, she's going to eat you alive. And then the whole story basically goes from there, mainly centered around mostly Paul and Molly's point of view, but the other two, Celeste and Brad, also had some play in this. These four kids don't want to be on the bottom of the food chain, so they have to do this talent show, this extra credit assignment stuff, and every time they do something, it's getting sabotaged, and they don't know who is sabotaging it, but it ends up being a twist at the very end. I don't want to spoil it, but it was, if you saw what this character was doing, you kind of saw it coming, and that kind of really fit the story very well. But anyway, the story builds and builds up this tension between Paul and Miss Marg until it gets to the very end, last few chapters, where a very scary scene happens in this auditorium, and then there's this realization that happens through the help of a weird kid that kind of was a side character throughout the whole story, and Paul uses that advice to get him out of the situation, and then the story ends on a very scary cliffhanger, and you don't know what really happens to Paul. So, yeah, Creature Teacher. For the most part, really good read. Very scary imagery. Anytime you have to deal with this teacher, it's unsettling. And she's very maniacal, and she's calculated. She has the mind of kind of like a serial killer almost. I really got that vibe from this teacher. Pretty eerie stuff. Paul, like I said, he's identifiable. The scary scenes involving their interaction, Paul's reaction to what she does, and nobody believes him when he tries to explain himself except his three friends, and especially that auditorium scene at the end that really turned up the volume for this book immensely. But was there any problems I have with this book? Not really. Nothing I would really deduct points on now. There are inherent problems, but I can't deduct points for them. A being, the ending we got was really good. The resolution, although how Paul gets himself out of the situation near the end, I kind of wish they did it. They wrote it in a different method. It was still really gross and still really creepy what he did, but I just wish they took a different direction, because this could have been way darker than what we got. It was already at that premise anyway. Why not? But the very ending kind of built that back up and didn't drop it. The whole book was based on this dark premise about like premeditated murder, basically, and then at the very end, if they would have just dropped it like it was all like for nothing, and that serious tone just disappeared along with the ending, that would have been really hurting to this book. But it ramped it back up at the very ending, in the very last paragraph. Good job. So I didn't deduct any points for that. So yeah, that's really the only thing that kind of messed with me. But like I said, I didn't deduct any points because it still worked very good. So on a scale from 0 to 5 stars, what would I rank Creature Teacher from Series 2000? Honestly, I'd give this a solid 5 out of 5 stars. And I'm not trying to be favoriting this book just because it's one of my favorites. No, I really think it's a good book. I think it's a perfect storm, kind of like It's Alive, where you have a blend of 3 different types of storytelling put together. I think that's like a very good recipe to tell a really good Goosebumps story. This has humor. This has dark humor, dark imagery, mature plot points for the most part, but it's still kid friendly. It's not just because there's like premeditated murder hints in this story. I wouldn't say that it's for mature audiences. Like I said, I think an 8-year-old can read this and be just fine, but it's told in a kid friendly fashion. So yeah, really enjoyed this. I gave it a 5 out of 5. What did you guys think of Creature Teacher? Did you guys love this or hate this? Let me know in the comment section. I want to hear your thoughts about it. And until next time, peace.